Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 269. My name is John. Joining me tonight is Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hello. Good evening.
We are convening tonight to discuss the final episode of The Acolyte, which is titled The Acolyte. So it is Thursday evening that we're recording this. The show concluded 2 nights ago on Tuesday night with this finale episode. So we've had 2 days to kind of talk about it and think about it and all that kind of stuff. And we are going to share our thoughts for the final time here on a new episode of The Acolyte. Unless, of course, it comes around again in the future. You never know if there'll be a second season of The Acolyte or not. So, Ryan, how about big picture thoughts on this episode of The Acolyte before we kind of jump into the details?
Yeah, I like this episode a lot. I was surprised and delighted with some of the kind of conclusions that the show came to. I will say it is, like the show itself, it is imperfect, and there are some things that definitely did not work for me in this episode. Again, like the show itself, but overall, I think, this episode felt like a bold statement of really committing to like a Star Wars thing that feels new and fresh and surprising.
Cool. Yeah. My kind of big picture impression of the finale here, not my favorite episode, maybe my least favorite episode, although I will say I rewatched it today, and as is often the case with, I think, like especially something that's a little disappointing initially, I feel like when you give it another chance, sometimes, I don't know, the things that I didn't love didn't bother me necessarily quite as much on the second viewing because they weren't a surprise. I knew to expect them, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a little, it landed a little bit more with me on the second viewing, but, yeah, I was surprised by a few things. Well, that's not even really true, though. It's not even so much that I was surprised by things, because I think I kind of saw where some of this was headed, but just there's a term used a lot last week, which was execution, Ryan. I think some of the execution, I had issues with some of the ways things were executed, but we'll get into it as we talk about the episode in detail here. So, of course, episode 7 was a flashback episode. The episode before that, the previous episode, episode 6, kind of concluded with Osha putting the stranger's helmet on, which we learned is like a sensory deprivation sort of thing. And, he used the great line, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, only what you take with you is what you're going to kind of find in there, right? So it's going to shut everything else out, and you're going to see only what you take with you. Then we had a whole flashback episode last week, and then, of course, the finale opens up with Osha in the helmet, so picking up right where episode 6 left off. And I thought this was cool and interesting, but also I didn't totally understand what was happening in this moment. I don't know if maybe you have more of a clear idea of what was going on there, or what. It was intriguing. It was interesting, but I didn't totally understand what was happening there.
Yeah, this is a wild opening, because you have Osha in the helmet, and she's, like, freaking out, and the stranger is, like, legitimately worried about her and about her safety, and you can, like, see it on his face. It's super expressive. And then he's like reaching for the helmet and his eyes like glaze over and go dark, and they're like flashing through different states of being. It's all very like, I don't know, very forcey. Um, and it reminded me of like one of like the Jedi training scenes in The Last Jedi during Rey's training, whether the stuff with her kind of moving through like phases of existence, like in the the mirrored cave, or the her dealings with Ben Solo. Yeah, it was a very just like weird and ephemeral scene that I don't fully understand, but it's definitely like it's interesting and it looked cool.
Well, I felt like it was trying to make a connection to Mother Anastasia because Mother Anastasia did whatever she did to Torben, and when she did that, when we were seeing from Torben's perspective, the lighting and like the colors were the same. It was like this dark blue kind of like, and then when it would cut back to Mother Anastasia and what she was, or just everybody else, that color or lighting or whatever went away. So it was like showing like, this is, like she has like possessed him or done whatever she's done to him. And then he sees the world in this sort of, with this lens, right? Like this bluish nighttime kind of like, color scheme and all that kind of thing. But then it would cut to the other perspective, which is like the outside perspective, right? So that was the same. And then obviously also the eyes like rolling back in the head and turning black was the same, So I felt like it was that again, but I didn't think that she, knew she was like, she wasn't intentionally doing that to the stranger. So I just, it was kind of like clearly the same kind of power or a similar kind of power coming from a similar place. But, I just didn't understand, like, is she doing that to him? Is the helmet doing that to her? It was just a little unclear, I think.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there's definitely some like weird powers going on, because it almost looks like he switches locations because like the background changes so significantly. It's kind of hard to tell, but yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so, well, what she tells him then after that is that she sees a vision of May killing Soul, and she wants to stop him. And I thought this was also intriguing, the dialogue here, because she's like, I know where they are, I'm going to go. And he's like, well, with what ship? And it was the first time on that planet where the stranger, was a little bit, I would say kind of dropped the mask or whatever, where he's been so like, like comforting to her and just like whatever you want. And, like being very like soothing and trying to like reel her in. And then for just a second, he was like, well, with what ship? You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go, but like, I don't know how you're going to get anywhere. And anyway, they make this deal where it's like, well, I want to go stop her. You have the ship, but I know where they are. So the only way this is going to happen is if we go together, sort of thing. Yeah. Does that seem like an accurate?
Yeah, I mean, they're both being very clever here.
Yeah.
Two peas in a pod.
With different objectives, though. At this point, they have opposite objectives. Obviously, that will not be the case as the episode goes on. But they have opposing objectives. Although, I would think for the stranger, he probably does want to get her to the same place as Soul, right? Because that works out pretty well as it goes on. So, but yeah, But there was a little, just for the first time, there was a little bit like, hey, maybe I have more power than you. Like maybe I'm not gonna, maybe I would resist a little bit if you want to make a choice or take an action that's outside of like what you know I'm looking for out of you or whatever. So I just thought there
Yeah,
was a little edge there, and that was interesting.
but also I think it's interesting the way that like she could hang, and she like immediately kind of, threw it back at him.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah,
And like obviously like she knows the risks of him going there, and
yeah.
so I think, I don't know, I think this is maybe some foreshadowing of their allegiance, their alliance.
Sure. Yeah. Well, from there it cuts to Soul and May. So the sort of opposite pairing, right? You've got the dark side, light side pairing of the stranger and OSHA, and then kind of the opposite kind of angle on that with Soul and May, and they're having the conversation where she's like, why did you do what you did, etc. And as that's happening, she's kind of like she's engaging him in this conversation, but also using Pip to break out of her restraints, without him, noticing or whatever. So they're having this conversation, and he's like, "Hey, I didn't write down every word he said, but he said it was right to intervene." He said, "My biggest regret is that I couldn't save you both." And then he's explaining that you are not two different. I don't know if he said this exactly, but he was in the process of saying, you guys are not sisters. You're two parts of the same whole. You're the same person in a sense or whatever. But as he was, kind of finishing up saying that, she used Pip to shock him, bolt out of there, jump into an escape pod, and take off. And of course, he follows in the ship. So it's a pretty cool sequence. I guess it's like a ring, like a ring of Saturn type thing, right? I don't know the scientific terminology for that, but that's like what they're kind of cruising through as she's trying to escape down to Brendock. Is that accurate?
Sure.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know
I mean,
if there's
I don't think the planet is the most interesting part of this scene.
No. But I'm just saying, like, it was a cool, like, it was like kind of a big special effect, like, one of the bigger, like, I don't know, set piece type things that we've seen because this is a Star Wars TV show on Disney Plus, and there's some really great fight scenes and lightsaber choreography and stuff like that, but you're also not getting like big space chase sequences too often. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and after this, I'm wondering if maybe we don't need them in the show. Yeah, I don't think it looked very good.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it looked pretty solid. I thought it looked pretty decent, but
It looked like kind of just like video game CG to me. I don't know.
Okay.
But I also don't think like I think that was, in there to be like, hey, this is a Star Warsy thing, but like I don't think that's like the biggest takeaway from this scene. I think there's a lot of interesting dialogue here because it starts with Soul being like, "Yep, I'm gonna go to the Jedi Council. I'm gonna tell them everything." At the beginning, and then and then she's like, then he's like, "There's virgins. I'm going to prove it." And then she's like, "So it was justified for you to kill my mother?" And what I'm trying to remember, what does he say after that? Oh, like then he's like, it was an accident, and she's like, well then if it was an accident, why did you hide it from OSHA?
Yeah.
And
Right.
why did you
And
lie
she
to
asks you, I
OSHA?
think, like, why didn't, if it was the right thing to do, why didn't you tell the council? Right.
Yeah,
Also. So, yeah.
yeah.
But he doesn't really give an answer, right? He just says, my biggest regret is that I couldn't save you both, or something along those lines. And also that, does he tell her in this scene that if he told the council or whatever, then OSHA would never become a Jedi? I know he uses that as his justification at some points in this episode. I don't remember if he does in this scene or not.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and then go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to talk about the chase scene.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just going to say, like, this is like the first of a couple moments where I felt like, wait, what? Why? Like, what is happening? Why is this character doing this right now? Like, I don't understand necessarily what's happening or like why they're doing it. And I'm referring to Basil, like running in there, sniffing around in the cockpit, and then like sabotaging the ship that Soul is piloting. And obviously Basil doesn't talk, so that's fine. But it just felt, I didn't think that was really made sense, or I guess I just don't understand like why Basil was doing that. Like I know obviously one possibility is like Basil thinks that Soul is about to shoot down May's ship or something, but I didn't think that's what he was doing. I thought he was like trying to pull the ship back in. This is probably something that could have been a little more clear. Like, I think there's ways that this could have been produced and the audience would know what was happening. Like if George Lucas was making this and it was a prequel era thing, there'd be like a giant graphic of like a magnet hook or something, like a hook shot or whatever, like whatever it is. Like I feel like, or some droid would say out loud like what was happening. But yeah, I just didn't understand. I think he was trying to pull her back or something. Maybe Basil didn't understand that. Maybe Basil thought Soul was trying to shoot the ship down, but it just felt, I didn't get it. So I don't know if you can help me out with that or not, but I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a problem then, because to me, I thought it was like Soul was using like the targeting computer to like target her, and yeah, maybe it was like gonna use a tractor beam or something.
Yeah.
But I read that as like he's just gonna shoot her, and so then I was like, oh, Basil's saving her by doing that.
Right.
Is how I read read the scene. But if that's not clear, then that's a problem.
Yeah, and that could be the case, but the two things that don't add up, if that is what it's supposed to be, is A, Basil is the one who like told on May, and like as far as we know, Basil is like, whoa, Soul, this is not the person you think it is, like I'm gonna tattle on her. You know what I mean? So number one, that doesn't really make sense for Basil. And then number two, Soul's whole thing is like, I need OSHA and May to prove to the council that there's a vergence. So I don't see why he would be like, I'll just blow her up. You know what I mean? And then third, I would say too, the ship is like 8 inches away from her ship. Like I've never seen in Star Wars where one ship is like 2 feet away from the other one, and they're like, but I can't shoot. I gotta wait until, like, if he was trying to shoot her down, why wouldn't he be shooting at that ship? You know what I mean? Because he never takes even one shot, and he's so close. Like that seems like I could make that shot. You know what I mean? And he doesn't ever take it. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess I just feel like from watching the scene twice, I can come up with a couple theories of what might be happening. Like what you said makes some sense, and what I said makes some sense, but like neither one of them, I feel like it's like clearly communicated what that's supposed to be,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, the only thing I could think for Basil like changing his tune is he could have overheard them talking and been
Yeah.
like, oh wow, this is really messy. Like, dude killed their mother. Like, this is complicated. Maybe there's not a clear good guy or bad guy here. But I think for that to work, you need to slice in a shot of Basil overhearing them talking. Like, you need to have him like sniffing from around a corner or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I will definitely agree now that, like, I mean, I watched it and I just read the scene in one way, but then hearing this, it's like, yeah, okay, that's not totally clear.
Right. Yeah, it's a weird thing to kind of slip through the cracks there, but and usually, I don't really like to like ultra nitpick like that and try to pick stuff apart, but like I just really don't get it, I guess. So, and I've seen some discussion about it too, and I like every time that scene comes up, I feel like people are like, well, maybe this is happening, or like I haven't seen anybody be like, oh, for sure this is what happened. Everybody seems a little like, not sure. I haven't listened to any other podcasts because I don't do that until we record ours. So I'm curious to see if this was like a sticking point for, the couple like Star Wars podcasts I listen to, if anybody else brings this up, or maybe it's just a thing that I, for some reason, zeroed in on. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think identifying a trend, especially in, the past few episodes, or specifically this episode and the previous one, where like things just aren't terribly clear in how they're visualized, how they appear on screen, and not in like an interesting or ambiguous way of like, I really don't understand what you're telling me right now because it's not clear, which is that just, it seems very strange for for a Star Wars show which goes through multiple layers of people and producers and executive producers and Lucasfilm and Disney, and so many people have their eyes on something like this, and typically every little thing gets caught, and there is like an attempt to provide clarity, and whether it's the answer you want it to be or not is like not really the that's where the discourse comes in. But here I feel like, and we're like not nitpicky people, I feel like, when it comes to just like movies and TV, like we are willing to let a lot of stuff slide, but it is like this issue of like, I seriously don't understand what's being communicated because it's extremely unclear, and I've talked to 4 different people who have read this 4 different ways, and not in like a good way.
Yeah, and I think maybe I don't know. It'd be interesting, I guess, to go back and watch, because like there were some instances of this in previous episodes too, but I think I was a little more sort of just thinking like, well, the show is meant to be mysterious and ambiguous, and it's not clear now, but after another flashback, it'll be clear, or you know what I mean? Like, but this is the last episode, and so like leaving things sort of unclear like this, it's like, no, actually, I think you just kind of fumbled this scene a little bit, because there's no reason to, and I guess what I'm trying to say is like, maybe if I went back and watched some of those previous scenes that I sort of went, that didn't make total sense, but it's there's probably a reason now, and maybe I would go back and watch it and go, no, there wasn't a reason. It just wasn't, super clear or whatever. So I don't know. I'll tell you who is very clear though, Ryan. Senator Rayencourt, I think is his name, who is in the next scene, because he doesn't like the Jedi very much. And he shows up unannounced to have a little conversation with Vernestra. And they lay it all out on the line there. He's like, I think you don't like us. She's like, well, yeah, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan, guy. And then he tells her, well, I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion. and also says it's only a matter of time before one of you snap. So that was quite the little verbal confrontation between those two.
Love that. I really love this scene, and I I think this scene won me over on everyone's least favorite Jedi. I really like Mog or Mark.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I guess by the end of this episode, he's definitely not. He's not the actual worst Jedi in this show. He's, annoying, but I just love this part where he comes and talks to Vernestra and is like, the senator's here to see you, and she's like, where is he? And he's like, well, he's in there. And he like points him right behind him. And he's just so, I don't know, he's so offbeat and goofy.
He is goofy.
It made me a fan right here.
I liked him a lot more in this episode too, and I thought it was pretty funny when she's like, "You let him in," and he just goes like, "Wait, he doesn't like." Yeah. Well, I better just not even answer. I mean, she's gonna think I'm even more of a dumbass if I answer, so I'll just be like, I won't say anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
some great facial expressions from him.
Yeah. So. But yeah, it's that's an interesting scene to watch because and just the senator is an interesting character too because obviously there's a lot of truth to a lot of what he's saying, you know what I mean? But then on the other side of it, it's like, well, I don't know, like he's also a senator and he seems to be, I don't know. I just don't really trust him that much either. You know what I mean? I don't know what his intentions are. It's probably a power play for him too. So it's just one of those things where it's like, I certainly don't think the senators or the Senate is a infallible institution. Clearly the Jedi are not an infallible institution, and he has some legitimate complaints there. So, just one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, what you're saying makes quite a bit of sense. And, I think Vernestra's defense makes sense too. Like, this is a guy who's hostile towards her, whole identity and community, and she's defending herself, but he makes some good points, and just a pretty well written and very well acted scene, I think.
Oh yeah, it is. There's the tension here is so good. It brings to mind scenes, some of the types of scenes we saw in Andor, and then also like the conversation between the Mandalorian and the client in season 1 of Mando. That there's just this like palpable tension between the characters, and like they keep like driving in the knife with just like zinger after zinger. And to me, this actually, I think there's a great deal of foreshadowing in this conversation, for both, the Star Wars saga as a whole, but also what could potentially come in a potential season 2. To me, I think, well, for one, the senator being like, what happens when one of you snaps, and that's Anakin, and then, but to me, I think of the senator's motivations here, and the Senate's motivation is to bring the Jedi in-house into the government. And I feel like this was their chance this is their chance or their first chance to kind of make that happen here, because they caught the Jedi in a screw up, and now it's like, well, we can't, this is out of control. We can't have, this sort of unchecked power, operating as, religious vigilantes. And so, but they're also like, I don't know, there have probably been conversations of like, well, what if, like, between senators of like, what if the Jedi were our police force, our military? And I do wonder if that's part of the bridge from, the High Republic era to the prequel era, because obviously that's how George essentially has the Jedi in the prequels when we catch up in Phantom Menace.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because she does sort of outmaneuver him by the end of the episode. She kind of sells her soul to do it, but she does kind of outmaneuver him, right? I mean, there's pressure on her, and they have their Senate tribunal meeting, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail as we get towards the end. But she kind of does sort of quell most of, like, because like what he's saying is like, well, and the Jedi snaps, like, then what? You know what I mean? And so by the end, she's sort of like, well, yeah, a Jedi snapped, and now it's taken care of, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. She it's almost like he puts this like worst possible scenario out in front of her. And by the end, she's like, yeah, the worst thing happened. It's over. We took care of it. You know what I mean? So it's like taking some of the power out of that, she just had to totally lie and cover up and, desecrate the reputation of her friend. You know what I mean? But like I'm saying, by the end, I think it does kind of like, so yeah, the foreshadowing is there, but then it's pretty clever the way it all shakes out.
Yeah, and we'll get to that the end when we get to the end, but I think what she does is not going to stick.
Okay.
I don't think that's the end.
Right. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. After that, we go back to whatever the name of the planet is that the Stranger and Osha are on.
Unknown planet?
Unknown planet in terms of the show, although I think we're pretty certain, especially with the reveal that's coming up, I think we're pretty certain it's that planet from Legends, the Balnock, or I forget the name of it, something like that. But because that planet is associated with a character that we're going to see here in a minute. But before we do, there's another conversation with the Stranger and Osha as they're getting ready to leave. And, basically he looks at her and he's like, would you ever consider, and he's talking about training her. Would you ever consider becoming my acolyte or my apprentice or whatever? And she's like, no, I'm not my sister. And his response is great because he says, you're definitely not. May made that deal without even thinking about it. Which, yeah, great little moment. I think what I take away from that is I feel like he has more respect for Osha than he does for May. I think he feels like Osha is the more formidable of the two. I think he feels like winning Osha over is more of a challenge, but that it's worth it, and that he, just has another level of respect for her because she's not so easily manipulated. She doesn't kind of go along with whatever he puts out there so quickly and easily. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yep. I think that makes sense. Like, this scene is wild though, because like they're walking to the ship and she's just like wearing a full black cloak at this point with like hood up and everything. And I mean, right here, I was like, "There's the Acolyte." Like,
yeah,
yep, there it is. Like, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty likely that she was going to end up, kind of turning to the dark side or whatever, once that switch happened in was it the fifth episode or the sixth? At the end of the fifth episode, I guess, right? Because it just felt like there's all this dramatic possibility of having Osha lined up with the stranger and all that kind of stuff. So it felt like she was going to turn, and that would be the most interesting thing. And obviously, many times Star Wars stories are about redemption arc, and it very much remains to be seen if that will be the case or not for Osha or the stranger or anybody. But we don't even know how much more of this story we will get. So who knows? But it definitely did not seem. It seemed pretty likely that she would side with the stranger. But I think this is good too, because in this scene, he's like, would you ever consider training with me? And she's like, no, you can't manipulate me. I'm not my sister. No way. I'm not going to do that, But like you said, like, she's wearing all black. She's, we know that she's headed towards where Soul is, and we feel like, we know she's going to get this information that's been hidden from her, right? So it all makes a lot of sense. But I think for people like me who would not want to see her turn to the dark side, like, it's given us a little more like, oh, maybe she won't, you know what I mean? And I think that's a good thing, to do at this point in the story and the episode, is to keep giving audiences, or the audience, hope that maybe she will, not turn to the dark side or whatever, when obviously she will. And, like I said, it seemed pretty likely that she will, but I guess they're not revealing. They're keeping, some level of mystery about it, or possibility about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, because it adds to a ton of the tension in the final kind of big conflict of the episode. But I think for me, I from episode 6, I was rooting for this outcome. I was ready for her and the stranger to team up, and I think I think it is kind of, I don't know. I feel like Leslie Headland really knew what she was doing, because I doubt I was the only one. I think maybe the audience would have been split like 50-50 by this point of whether Osha should join up with the stranger or not. I'm not really sure what the discourse was, but I think it was intentional, having that kind of romantic-ish tension in episode 6 between them, and just that high level of chemistry where, like, I don't need Star Wars to represent my own personal morality. Like, I think I can cheer for or be intrigued by characters doing the wrong thing, and like that's fine. I'm not gonna go slice up a bunch of people with a lightsaber. And so yeah, I was incredibly on board for her making the choice, and I felt like her motivations made sense, and why she would do this made sense. And I think by the time we get to some of the key moments where she really commits to the choice, like, I think it's all really well done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, more on that when we get to the point where she kind of turns to the dark side or whatever. But before that, Ryan, a thing that definitely had been part of the discourse, more and more in the weeks leading up to this episode, is, will we see Darth Plagueis, or will we see, I think the one before him is Darth Tanabris or something like that. That's the Bith Sith. So I guess I need to go read the James Luceno book and learn about these two, and what was established in legends about them and all that kind of stuff before this. But I'm thinking that means maybe we skipped over the the Bith Sith, and we're just going straight to Darth Plagueis, who would be Palpatine's master, right? So, yeah, I think that's where things are going. But yeah, very cool reveal. Kind of like a little bit of an odd reveal in the way that it happens. I feel like just because I think you referred to him this way, and I've also seen other people refer to him as a cave creeper. The music is ominous when he is revealed. He looks really cool and very, sort of foreboding and ominous and whatever. But he also, like, there's a certain, like, almost like frailty, I feel like, to like the blocking and the kind of the way the character is standing there in the shadows, which I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it's a little weird. He doesn't seem super, like, he doesn't seem to be a position of power as he's hiding there in the cave watching them. And I don't know if it's meant to be or if it's not meant to be or what, but it's definitely it's kind of an interesting way to reveal him. But as you know, I texted you right in the middle of watching the episode because I was like, holy shit. That's Darth Plagueis. Like, I knew they were going to do it. It's crazy. So what's that?
Yeah. I said holy Sith.
Oh, holy Sith. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, how did you feel about the Darth Plagueis reveal?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even thinking in those terms. Like, I was not. I think I talked about on a previous episode. Like, I don't care what Legends stuff ends up in Star Wars or not, and I think like I love the scene in Revenge of the Sith where, at the opera where Palpatine's telling the story. I know it's kind of just like a meme now, but I think that story is, and the performance there is incredible and chilling. And but like I've also been kind of the mind, after, seeing the movie, seeing Revenge of the Sith, and I think like the immediate discourse was like around, did Darth Plagueis ever really exist, or was that just, Palpatine telling a story to manipulate Anakin, and in a way that there was no way Anakin could fact check it, because he's like, well, the Jedi would never tell you this, and so yeah, so I was always, and I know there were books and stuff, but it was always like, well, either he existed or he didn't, but that's kind of beside the point of the purpose that the character served in Palpatine's story. And so I know people were like looking for him to appear in the show, and I was like, whatever, I don't care. But I always I just kind of pictured him as like a dude, and for some reason I guess I just hadn't ever seen the book cover, or if he's in comics or whatever. I just never actually seen that he's like a weird looking like an alien species. And
he's a Mun, I think.
A Mun.
I think that's how it's pronounced. Mun, Mun, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I did not know any of that. I just kind of I don't know. I guess I just expected like a creepy looking old man. I don't know. But so yeah, I saw this guy and I was like, whoa, that's just like a sick creature. That dude just looks like the Crypt Keeper, and it's awesome, and I love him. And it also made me go back to a thing I've said a million times. Like, I really want a Star Wars horror movie or TV show, because I think, I think there's so much that's like actually creepy about Star Wars, and I think once you start getting into like old school Sith stuff, like some of it's like absolutely insane. And so yeah, I saw him and I was like, man, I love this dude. I want like a whole movie about him. And then you were like, that's Darth Plagueis, or Kevin. I don't know, whoever said it first, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, that's cool too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it might have been Kevin because I I knew. Okay, I put it this way: if you had asked me before this episode aired, describe what Darth Plagueis looks like, I would not have been able to do it. Like I didn't know off the top of my head. Like like when I saw him, I wasn't like, oh, that's the way I've always seen Darth Plagueis depicted in imagery or in art. Like I couldn't have told you that. So I don't think that my reaction was just like that's definitely Darth Plagueis, but my reaction was that's the master. Like I've been thinking all along, as many people have, like that the stranger is the apprentice to a master, that he's not the end all be all, that he's like second in command or whatever. And with the whole rule of two thing, like his ultimate goal is to get an apprentice that he, together they could overthrow his master or whatever. So when I saw that, I was like, awesome. Like, this is intriguing that we now have another player on the board in terms of the dark side, and that, there is a master and all that. And I, of course, thought like it's probably Darth Plagueis or Darth Tenebris, if that's his name. But I wasn't super sure. But then I think one of you guys sent the cover of the Darth Plagueis book by James Luceno, and once I saw that cover, it was like, well, okay, yeah, for sure, obviously it's him. But also just that it's that planet, because that's the planet. I think that planet is features in that book, called Darth Plagueis. So I think it all kind of adds up, right? So yeah, I really hope we get a second season so that we can see more of this development.
Yeah, question for you though. So you okay, we both had talked about how there was probably the stranger had a master.
Yeah.
I was convinced it was going to be Mother Corrin. Time will tell on that, but it seems possible that obviously Darth Plagueis is the person who was shown to us here, so that's the most. I don't know if it's the most likely, because I mean it depends on where they're taking the story. I still think Mother Corrin that's the name, right? Mother Corrin?
Coral.
Okay, I was saying it. I'm like, no, that's wrong. Mother Coral, I think she still has a role to play in this, because we still have not seen her body in the deaths. So, but I think, yes, Darth Plagueis could be the master here, and he's just like creeping out here because he's like, oh yes, things are going according to my plan, which is possible. Like, that's a very Star Wars, very very Palpatine-y thing to do. Like, yep, where did Palpatine learn all those Palpatine-isms? Maybe it's from this guy. But also, I wonder if he is just interested in what's happening, and like he's just been existing in the shadows the whole time, and like the stranger doesn't actually know him or hasn't interacted with him.
Yeah, that's possible. That's super possible. That, yeah, for sure. That could be very possible. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think if that's the case, or whatever the case may be, to me, he is the top dog immediately already. You know what I mean? Because we know. I guess we don't know, because like you said, you always questioned if he was even real and all that kind of stuff. But I just think of the rule too, which was the Plagueis he's from Legends or whatever, but he was only he was plucked out of the prequels and brought into Legends, right? That's like the thing. And now being brought out of Legends back into, I guess, like whatever the canon or, whatever you want to say, live action. But, the prequels make a pretty big deal out of the rule of two. So I feel like as an audience member, like I know that Palpatine's lying and manipulating in that scene, but I never really questioned if Plagueis was his master, I guess, or, if Plagueis existed, just because I figure for Palpatine to be like the number one Sith now, he had to be the number two Sith to somebody else before. And so, I guess it could be some completely different, Sith that he just doesn't talk about. But anyway, it just makes sense to me that, yeah, Darth Plagueis is Palpatine's, master or whatever. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that if I'm seeing Darth Plagueis on screen and I know that, or I, am pretty confident that he is Palpatine's, Sith master, then the stranger already looks like, number two, like distant number two to me in terms of all that. It's like Darth Vader to the Emperor, or Kylo Ren to Snoke, or although Kylo does best Snoke. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm like, okay, here's the real Sith, like big time Sith master in Darth Plagueis. But I do like the idea that maybe he's like, what's this dude up to? Who's this pretender? What could be really interesting is if in the next season he looks at the two of them as a pair and says, which one of you two do I want? You know what I mean? Do I want the stranger? Do I want Osha? Do I want to pit you two against each other? And whoever survives, that's going to be the one that I'll go with. Is he working with Mother Coral? Maybe Mother Coral is his apprentice and he's the master to her. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of options and possibilities there for sure.
I still think, I'm just going to come back to the thing I've said 1,000 times in these conversations. I think it's all about motivation, and I think Mother Coral has the motivation for like a war against the Jedi, and as we kind of find out later, pretty soon in this episode, we were always wondering about what is the stranger's connection to the Jedi, and that's revealed in this episode. But then it makes perfect sense for them to be a pair, Mother Coral and the stranger, fighting this cause, because that's they have the motivation. And there's even like a point in one of the episodes where Soul is like, what are you, to the stranger in episode 5, and he's like, I guess you would call me a Sith, but he's not definitively like, I am a Sith. Like,
yeah, I'm with you, but the issue I have with that is like, if Mother Coral is the one who is behind all of this, the idea of sending the stranger out to win over May, or even more so to win over Osha, seems odd to me, because she is Osha and May's parent. And like, why would he be a better person to go to them and say, hey, the Jedi lied to you, like, you should not. It just like, why the middleman in that situation? I think one reason is to like bring her back and have it be a big surprise, you know what I mean? But again, that's like one of those things where I think a little more with this show than some of the other Star Wars shows or some of the other Star Wars stories recently. Sometimes it just feels like things don't always it's not always the most logical kind of reason for certain behaviors or certain plot points. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, that just seems, why wouldn't she be talking to her own children? You know what I mean? Why would she hide for 20 years or 15 years and have another person engaging with them if it's all about, you know what I mean? It just, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's needlessly. If that is the case, then it is needlessly convoluted for the purpose of like drama. And
Yeah.
but I do think like the questions you're answering, could be answered in a series of 2 flashback episodes in season 2.
In season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Keep that same structure. You're advocating for that. Cool. Got it.
I'm saying
no,
that
and
I the show might do.
I'm with you though that like she's got to be. I feel like it's very very likely that they're bringing her back in some way because we don't see her body and it's just like it's so obvious. You know what I mean? That there's something we don't know about her. You know what I mean? Like just yeah, there's too much intrigue for it to be for no reason. So I think you're right that they want to, or that the plan is to, that she is involved in some way somehow. But if there's a direct connection to the stranger, like you're suggesting, like I guess yeah, I'll have to see how they kind of explain that because that doesn't seem to be the path of least resistance at all. In terms of the story kind of playing out, but. I certainly, I think it's very possible. And I would say it's like 95% chance she's still around, coming back, going to be involved in some way if the show carries on. So, then we get to like the big action sequences of this episode. There's a lot of good lightsaber battling and even hand-to-hand combat. Kind of bounce back and forth between the Stranger and Soul having their lightsaber fight, which it's pretty cool and includes some of the martial arts kind of, choreography and filmmaking technique that we saw a little bit in a couple other episodes. Not as much as I expected, or I think a lot of us expected right after some of the trailers and the sneak peek footage from the Phantom Menace. I thought it was going to be the martial arts Star Wars show, the Matrix style, bullet time Star Wars show. And they're pretty reserved with that stuff. It was not constant or anything, which is probably a good call. But either way, there was some great sort of choreography and kind of martial arts type stuff in both of these fights. I thought. You have any comments on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved these 2 fight sequences here. I think they're, I think the highlights, I think one of the highlights across the board for this show are like these excellent fight sequences. And I think, there's the one in the first episode, like right when at the beginning of the start of the series, in the bar restaurant, that's phenomenal. Then obviously the fight in episode 5 in the woods, which is incredible. And then I think I think this episode kind of combined those in a way, because you have the more like hand-to-hand nature of the fight in the first episode, which is what we see between May and Osha, and then we also have just some like incredible lightsaber stuff between the Stranger and Soul. And I know like you were talking about the Matrix and you mentioned bullet time, but I don't think there was actually any bullet time in this series. There's wire work.
Well, okay, maybe bullet time is a little bit,
or do any slowdown techniques.
Oh, they definitely slow down. They definitely will slow down and then speed back up. Like when he was falling backwards, it would like slow down and then speed back up again. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by bullet time. And maybe that's not an accurate use of the term, but they don't really do that. I mean, once in a while, I guess maybe they did that once or twice in The Last Jedi too, right? Where it sort of like slowed down and sped back up. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Yeah, that kind of, it was just a little more stylized action, I guess, than we would usually get in Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think the lightsaber stuff is super impressive. It's really tense. There's like 3 different times that I thought someone was going to get the killing blow in it. There's like a little bit of like samurai film styling.
Yeah, the samurai thing was really cool, where it's like they're on the right side and the left side, and then they cross past each other, and it's like, oh, who got sliced in half there, or whatever, you know what I mean? And the answer was neither, but I thought for sure, like, this is classic, like, I just watched Seven Samurai last week. I was like, somebody just ate it, you know what I mean? They're gonna fall over. Or like that episode of Rebels, which is influenced by that too. But yeah, that's what I thought was happening there. So
yeah, it's incredible. There are a few moments like that where like you just like hold your breath, and you know that's what that technique is there for. It's to make the audience go like, and then like wait for that resolution, and like they hold on it like just the right amount of time. Like it was brilliantly shot. And then there's also the very cool stuff with the stranger's lightsaber, where he's like pulling it apart and putting it back together, and the like Soul uses the Force to send the 2 saber parts like flying. Just a lot of really cool stuff here. And then holy crap, choreographing a fight scene between the same person.
Yeah.
The same actor.
Yeah.
Like the May and Osha fight. Because a lot of what we had seen was like, oh, this is the back of one of their heads, and we're like swapping camera angles, and there's obviously like a stand-in here for these scenes. And then this episode is just like, it's movie magic, the way that they're like interacting with each other. And I hope we get a second season of The Acolyte, but at the very least, I need a making of an effects episode, because this is
Disney
like,
Gallery.
Yeah, this is incredible stuff here.
Yeah, agreed. And of course, they mirror each other's movements, you know, like basically perfectly, which makes a lot of sense since they are being presented as, 2 parts of the same whole, right? So that's pretty cool for sure. So at the sort of conclusion of the battle between Soul and the stranger, Soul kind of destroys the stranger's lightsaber, and has the lightsaber out sort of to the stranger's neck and just kind of standing there. And I don't know what he's going to do. But May ends up, sort of sliding in and grabbing Soul's lightsaber, and the stranger tells her to strike him down. I think he tells her journey will be complete if she strikes him down or whatever. But May says, no, I want him to face the High Council. I want him to face the Senate and the Republic. I want him to pay for his crimes. So that's sort of, I guess, like maybe the first part of May's kind of, face turn in this episode. Although I don't know, I struggle to understand where she's coming from in certain moments in this episode. But this I thought made sense, like the stranger wants her to go down the dark side path, and this is typical dark side stuff, right? Like, cut Dooku's head off, kill your father, whatever, right? Like it's typical stuff. And she kind of rises above that and says, no, like, let's make him pay for his crimes. It's basically if Palpatine told Anakin to, kill Dooku, and Anakin actually stuck with, no, I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean? Rather than going through with it, which is great because it sets up the much more shocking kind of event, which is Osha ending up killing Soul instead. But I thought this was really well done as far as the Soul and Osha component of it goes, because May questions Soul again about killing their mother, and why did you do it, and all that kind of stuff. And he argues to May that what he did was right. He wanted to protect both of them, and is saying that you and Osha are the same person. And May's like, so you killed our mother? And he's like, yes, I did, right? And he confesses to it. Osha is standing there and hears that, says to Soul, why didn't you tell me? Soul says, they would have sent you away. I did everything because, and he's saying, I love you. And this was like, again, really well done. She's like, stop talking. And she's doing the force choke to him. And I thought it was good too, because she doesn't like hold her hands out like Darth Vader. It's not all theatrical or whatever. She's not like, she doesn't have his like invisible windpipe between her fingers or anything. Not that I don't like it when Darth Vader does that, but I think it would have seemed a little corny here. So I like that she's just standing there and we understand what's happening, but it's not played like melodramatically like that or whatever. So yeah, she chokes him to death. And, of course we'll talk about this too, but she bleeds, her saber bleeds in that moment. And it's not even something she's doing intentionally. I think it's just so much, rage or anger or whatever in that moment that the saber bleeds and turns from blue to red. But I turned on the subtitles as I was watching this again today, because there's a moment where Soul's like kind of choking, speaking to her, and I couldn't tell what he was saying. But I turned on the subtitles, and the last thing he says to her is, it's okay. And then, moment or two later, he dies, falls over. Osha falls to her knees. And yeah, it's just a very dramatic, very intense kind of scene. But I think it makes total sense that Osha would do that. And I am somebody who is like, I'd rather see the good guy character of Osha, overcome the dark side influence and not turn to the dark side. But I think it 100% makes sense in this story for her to do that, because she's been lied to. This extremely crucial piece of information has been held from her by her father figure for decades. And so for her to hear that and feel that betrayal, and that deception, like, if that wouldn't push someone over the edge, to turn to the dark side or whatever, what would, right? So, yeah, I think that all makes a ton of sense and is actually very well executed, no pun intended, in the scene here.
Yeah, I think this is an all-timer Star Wars surprise but not surprise moment. It was, it's like that, Kylo in the throne room with Snoke, where you're like, oh wow, he just did that. That kind of changes everything. When he slices Snoke instead of Rey. And yeah, this was such a tense, well-directed, well-written sequence. And, you were talking about, like, her kind of snapping because of, the weight of being lied to. But it's also stated in this episode that the reason why she was kind of like kicked out of the Jedi Order or stopped her training or whatever was because she had so much rage and hatred and anger that she couldn't control.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was previously directed at her sister.
Yeah.
And then now in this moment, she still has obviously these anger issues under the surface, but she's dealing with the fact that she was lied to and that she had spent all these years with that anger directed at her sister that basically ruined her career as a Jedi, and then she finds out the actual source of it, it makes like even more sense that she would do it. And then there's also just this like incredible dramatic tragic irony that the show starts with May's quest to kill these 4 Jedi, and May kills 3 of them, and then Osha kills the last one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it's so good. Like, this is where I can, there are many flaws in this show, and I think there's so many things they could have done differently, done better. There's going to be more things in this episode that I wish they did differently or didn't do or did better, but it's like, it's moments like this and like the totality of the story that it's like, man, yeah, this is the money shot of where everything kind of comes together in such a dramatic and tragic way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I think that I think though that Osha, I don't know that she had like this intense hatred and anger and rage towards May before. Maybe. But, like she says, like when she's talking to May earlier, May's like, well, you blame me for everything, or Osha, he just blamed me for everything, Soul blamed me for everything. And Osha's like, he never blamed you. I wish I don't have exactly what he says, but she's like, he never blamed you. He was trying to teach me to accept that someone I love could have done something so terrible or whatever, which obviously is still dishonest because, like, yeah, she started that fire, and I think Soul thinks that she did it, like, he doesn't, I don't think he understands how much of an accidental thing it ended up being, which I feel like that's something that the character, like, I'm okay with this, I'm not a big complainer or anything, but, like, we as the audience know, like, she didn't try to set a fire, she just was, like, burning up a book, and then it turned into this whole fire. And at no point does she ever like tell anyone like she's like, yeah, I started that fire that killed everybody. Like if it was me, I'd be like, well, yeah, I did it, but it was a total accident. I didn't mean to do it, But like she seems like okay with like just letting everyone think that she intentionally started this fire. But that's besides the point. The point I think is that like as flawed as Soul is, and as much as Soul did hide the truth and lie to Osha all that time, it doesn't seem. I guess I'm just trying to say it doesn't seem like he was like. I think the way that he was mentoring her or whatever was not like stoking anger and hatred towards May, which is that's why Osha's like, I failed or whatever, and it's May's like, no, you didn't fail, he failed you, which I think is true. But I guess she seems like she was close to being able to be on that path of like acceptance and forgiveness and all that. Like I don't really think like she was like consumed by anger and hatred, but in this moment, but it probably took a lot of work to not be, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of focus to not be in all that stuff. And I think in this moment, it's just like open the floodgates and just let all that in, you know what I mean? Just embrace all of that like anger and hatred, in a way that she hadn't before,
So in the scene with May and Osha before they get into their fight scene, Osha says to May, I failed at becoming a Jedi, and her words here are, I could never learn to calm my negative emotions, my hatred of you, my grief over our mother. And so I never became a Jedi.
Okay.
And
well, that's
so,
a pretty... Hatred is the word. Yeah.
And so I think, again, like, it goes back to Soul. If he's, like, mentoring her, and he's like, damn, girl, you have a lot of hatred for your sister. Well, I guess that makes sense, because she did kill your coven. when she started that fire
Yeah.
that killed everyone. Because that's the story I'm telling you.
Yeah, I guess so. But right before that, May does say like, or Osha does say he never blamed you, which I think, I don't know. I mean, there's no denying it, right? Like he let her believe that Maze was responsible for everybody's death there, including. I mean, the biggest thing is like he lets Osha believe that their mother died in a fire when he knows full well he pulled out a lightsaber and stabbed her with it, right? So there's no dancing around that. That just is what it is, right? Like that is completely dishonest and untrue, and whatever. But I guess I just don't like picture him. I picture him trying to help her overcome that hatred, not like stoking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think he could have helped her overcome it real fast if he would have just told her the truth.
Well, obviously, yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So there is this other line here, that where Osha in this scene says, Soul's lied to you every day since you left our home. How could he teach you to control your negative emotions? He's the reason you have them.
Yeah.
And then she says, you didn't fail. He did.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when they
which I think is
fighting.
Yeah, because again, like that's when, like, yeah, that's interesting too, because Osha gets so angry in that moment, right? Like, to learn that she's been lied to in this way, and it's not totally logical, but it's emotional. But she's like taking it out on May, right? She's attacking May in that moment. She's not attacking Soul, right? So, really, she's finding out that she doesn't really have as much of a reason to attack May, right, as she thought she did. But May's the messenger, I guess, the person delivering that information, and yeah, she loses control, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it could be.
Although then, like, we don't see the conclusion of that battle. We just see like one of them show up before the other. When the conversation with the stranger and Soul happens. So I don't know if they just like. It's like a wrestling match where they both roll out of the ring to the other side to regroup and then, end up in different places or what. But yeah.
Yeah. I think, does May, like, May vanishes.
Oh, okay.
In the fight. And then
okay.
Osha's just left there. Because they see the ship coming over and they get distracted, and then May is just gone.
So interesting. Okay.
They don't talk anything out. But
that's a move the stranger has used a couple times.
Yeah, a little
just like disappearing like that.
Yeah. But I do think that moment is so interesting where Osha does just like attack after that conversation, because obviously like her enemy is probably not May in this scene, in this moment, but she is like just filled with so much like rage, which is like you can see her like shaking ahead of it, and it's like, yep, she has issues, like, I think anger issues is a little trite, but it's like this, these issues with negative emotions, these just like internal screaming. And I think it could, it could be because she doesn't believe May, and she's like, how could you even say this? Because there is still the moment where she is like maybe supposed to be surprised when she walks in at that moment that Soul is admitting it. But it's a really complex, like I think it's really leaning into her very complex negative emotions in that moment that leads to like a cool fight scene.
Yeah, and it just makes sense too, like that, like this is the thing that you don't want to believe. You know what I mean? Because then you have to reassess everything you thought you knew about your family and your internal life, whatever, right? Like, I mean, it would cause her to question everything. So it's like, I think, yeah, she needs to hear him say it to like truly, truly internalize it and really accept that that's the truth. I'm sure she knows deep down that it is the truth, but she needs to like, really hear him admit it. So, after that, after, Soul is killed, they take off. And cause I guess they see that they know the Jedi are coming or whatever. Right. So they take off, they go to the tree, they have their, kind of an emotional moment connection. They're doing the poem, that they're doing in the third episode, and that they recited as kids. But then the stranger interrupts and says basically like, if I can find you, the Jedi can find you. Right. And then this is, especially on my first viewing, it didn't bother me quite as much watching it the second time, but this next scene really didn't land for me watching it the first time through, which is where basically like it's Osha, May, and the stranger, and then like the Jedi are coming. And then instead of May being like, all right, guys, let's go, or all three of them being like, let's go, Osha's like, what are you going to do with May or whatever? And she's like, I will train with you if you will let May go. And then the stranger is like, well, I could try to wipe her memory of me or you permanently. And then May's like, okay, sure. So like on an emotional level or a thematic level, I guess I understand it that May's like making this big sacrifice for Osha, but it's almost like a solution in search of a problem to me. Like, why she shouldn't have to, like, why does she have to make that sacrifice? Like, why don't they all just go off together? You know what I mean? And then at the end of this emotional scene, Osha's like, I will find you. I'll find you. And I'm just like, I mean, I wasn't that upset, but like, I'm like yelling at the TV, like, you don't have to find her. She's right there. There's no, like, why can't, I just don't, you know what I mean? It's just kind of, I just don't really get it. And I think it could have been more emotional and it could have been more effective if I was like bought into the fact that this needed to happen, but it just didn't feel like it needed to happen to me. So where are you at with all that, Ryan?
Yeah, I don't think it's great. I think it is way over complicated for seemingly just the purpose of drama and potentially like extending and decompressing a story further in the next season if that happens. Like the search of the sisters for each other, just it feels wholly unnecessary. I think it's like, honestly, like I'm also pretty burned on this sort of thing after the Mandalorian thing, where it's like this big dramatic moment where Din gives up Grogu to Luke, and then like just like gets him back in an episode of Book of Boba Fett. Like, no big deal. It's like this very like weird tendency of like Star Wars TV to like, we have to separate these characters and it's going to be so dramatic, and then it's like, well, no, you really didn't need to separate them. Like Din could have just like gone and like hung out while Grogu was training. And I know there's like rationale for that, whatever, but it ended up being like this total non-thing. And so like, yeah, I think it's like overcomplicated, and I think mind wipes are just dumb. I don't like when they do it to droids. I don't like when they do it to people, it's, it's funny in Men in Black, but it's like generally like just a bad plot device, I think, in storytelling device. So I don't like that, but I do like I don't know, I guess the tragic irony again of like Osha getting to fulfill her dream to be a Jedi and to train with the Jedi, but that was something that she couldn't do because of her negative emotions, and now she gets to channel those negative emotions to train as potentially as a Sith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that that is like I think that's really good writing and makes total sense. And the way this is all set up is like, the big kind of moment for her at the end of this season or whatever is that she, this betrayal is revealed. She can't trust any of these people that she thought she could trust, all that stuff. Like for that to channel her into the dark side and sort of be like, the Jedi failed me. I'm going to do the opposite, thing. But it's still kind of like you said, I'm still training. I'm still learning to use my power, but I'm doing it from the other perspective. That makes total sense. And like, honestly, yeah, I guess like I'm, we talked about it already, but I'd rather see like, well, I just really liked Osha, and I guess I just would have preferred that she stay on a personal level, prefer that she like overcome this or whatever. I guess that would have been the more satisfying thing to me, as a fan or an audience member or whatever. But I'm using that to preface the fact that I think this is the best way to write it. This is what the writing has all been leading up to. Mm-hmm. All of this is all set up for this to happen. And if it didn't happen, I don't think, I think this is the best outcome. I think this is the only outcome. This is the smartest and most effective way to conclude this part of this story. So I don't have any issues with that, like on a personal level, like I like the Jedi, I like the good guys, whatever, like, maybe on a personal level, but like I am completely understand and support and think this is the right thing to do as far as Osha going with the stranger. What doesn't make sense to me is May, and I just think there's probably like much cleaner ways to get where they got, which is May is with the Jedi and Osha is with the stranger. Like May seems to be like, I'm just never sure where she is in this episode, and like I just feel like watching Osha murder Sol in cold blood, basically, right? I just feel like that could have been for May. She could have been like, oh, like I didn't want to see you become that, Osha, or, I mean, like, or like she could just be horrified by that, or, you know what I mean? Like or the stranger that, the stranger was gonna kill her in previous episodes. Like there's no, you know what I mean? So there's just all these different ways where I feel like May could have been like, you know what? Nah, I'm going to go with the other side. And she spent all this time with Sol. Yeah, he restrained her, whatever, but like clearly she was listening to him. And I just think there's so many different ways where May could have been like, you know what? Nah, I can't go along with you turning to the dark side and being the stranger's apprentice. He was going to kill her. He had a lightsaber up to her head in episode 5, right? Like, it's not that hard. And this is such a weird way to accomplish, I think, what they want to accomplish.
See, I was totally okay with all that as a viewer. Like, to me, like, I feel like May was the one who was telling Osha all this stuff about Sol, and I think, like, it was kind of like a good riddance type thing. Like, why would she be like, oh my god, that's horrible, after she had just killed 3 Jedi? And was like...
Not... Well, yeah, but not... I know, but not... I don't mean, like, oh, Sol was so cool, I can't believe you killed him, or whatever, but, like, when she killed Indara, she had a look of, like, horror on her face. Mm-hmm. She tried to stop the stranger from killing Kelnaka on Kofar, mm-hmm. Like, I think as those first couple episodes, the first half of the season went on, we were less and less convinced that she really was like that she really wanted to be doing this. And then in the 5th episode, like, for sure, she's like, or maybe it's the fourth episode. Yeah, I think it's the fourth episode. But she's like, you know what? I don't actually even have to do this. I don't have to kill these people. Like it becomes clear like she's not like super internally motivated to go out and kill all these Jedi. This guy's just telling her to. And halfway through the show, way before this episode, she's like, you know what? Nah, forget you. I'm not gonna do. I don't need to do what you tell me to do. And I guess like because I feel like there's a way to write this that she loves her sister so much, right? And they've just reunited and all that stuff. Like, and I think at least I think it could have been written this way, or would make sense to be written this way, where she feels like she was manipulated and tossed aside by the stranger, right? Mm-hmm. And there's all this dialogue where the stranger's saying to Osha, the Jedi trained you and they just threw you away. My master trained me and just threw me away, right? Well, didn't he do that to May? So for me, it would be very natural. They didn't pursue this, but they certainly could have in these last couple episodes of May being like, yeah, I thought I could trust the stranger, or maybe not trust him, but I thought like that was a person that I had some allegiance to or had some allegiance to me, but nope. You know what I mean? So it would be a total inversion, like mirror images here, right? Osha is like, I should go to the dark side. May is like, I should turn away from the dark side. But they don't really do that. They have May in this place where it's like, I don't know what she really wants. And then she's like, oh, I want to be with you, Osha. So wipe my memory and you guys go somewhere else, even though there's 3 seats on that plane. I could just go with you. But like, it's so weird, messy and just weird. I don't know.
It is messy. Yeah. But I think like I don't know, like I'm very pro Osha killing Soul here. I think that was, it was satisfying for that character's arc. I think it was you brought this upon yourself, dude, kind of thing, like, as a viewer. But once again, like, I don't need to, ascribe my own morality to Star Wars characters and have them, act according to my morals. But like, I think what's kind of being communicated by the whole like being discarded, I think like the being discarded by masters, by institutions, is like, I think that's like one of the themes. It's how these characters all ended up on the paths that they were. And like the reason I think someone like the stranger would just do that sort of thing is because like that's what he's been taught and what he's learned, because like the institutions have failed all of these characters. And it is kind of like that that Greenberg hurt people kind of thing, where these characters who have their own traumas that they've never been able to deal with are just going to continue to inflict trauma on others.
Yeah. So then that would be a super logical and easy to follow reason for May to turn away from the stranger, right? Yeah, but they don't do that. I don't know. Yeah. I guess I kind of confuse things by saying like that maybe part of why May should kind of turn more towards the light side is because she watched Osha kill Soul, because it doesn't have anything to do with Soul and whether I think he should have. I think that's what needed to happen there too. But I'm just like, I guess, looking at all these different avenues where May could have said, Osha, I can't follow you down this path. Osha, I can't go with the stranger. I can't be part of this. I think there's just a lot of different opportunities that could have been the conversation. And instead it's like, there's nothing stopping me from going with you guys, but let's come up with like a convoluted and weird and hard to buy reason, and
so
it just really took me out of the episode.
Yeah, I think the conclusion they came up with is bad. Like I said, mind wipes suck. Like, it's a really bad plot device. It's terrible in Star Wars when it happens to droids, and it's
Well,
it's
the
really bad.
the mind wipe sucks, but the mind wipe sucks. But then even before that, and I'm sorry to cut you off, and I know you're going to finish that point, but the mind wipe sucks. But like even worse is like I don't know why they even needed it. You know what I mean? So like if there was like a problem where it's like, okay, the mind wipe is the reason they chose to solve this problem, I'd be like, that's not a great solution, but I guess whatever. But like I'm a step before that. I don't even see why they need it. Like, what was the problem that had to be solved with the mind wipe, which itself is a stupid solution, you know?
So here's my thinking on why they felt like why they had like written themselves into this like terrible situation is so if I think it would have been fine if they all left together and just went on this adventure, and similar to in Ahsoka where like Ahsoka is just training Sabine on the side, or like Obi-Wan is training Luke on the side, and there's other characters, and they're going around to kill Jedi or whatever they decide to do with their lives from this point, or just hide from the Jedi, whatever. I think they all could have gone together and it would have been fine, and you could still tell a really good story that way. But I think they wanted the separation for whatever weird reason. Star Wars always wants to separate characters. It's always like such a big deal in the movies where characters get separated so they can have their own stories or whatever. And it's just like this kind of like weird trope of Star Wars that sometimes is cool and then sometimes is just like, why couldn't you have just been together instead of going off on this like weird side story? And so I think for whatever reason they're like, we need to do a Star Wars-y separation so that it the characters can work themselves back together or whatever. But I think if what you had described, where May is like, I can't follow you down this road. It's the Rey to Ben Solo in The Last Jedi, where she's like, no, I can't do this. Don't do this. Bye. I'm escaping. Then I think that would have informed Osha's reactions, and she would not be able to go all in on her training because she'd be like, oh, well, my sister thinks this is a bad idea, so I don't know how committed I am, and she needs to be fully committed to the training. But then if it was the other way, if like the stranger was like, no, I'm training Osha, you can't come with us, then again Osha would be like, okay, you're kind of a dick, you're telling my sister she can't be here, I don't want to train with you, kind of thing. So I'm thinking that's why they kind of tried to like have their cake and eat it too here, and just fell back on the most convoluted solution. And the other thing that I think would have been, could have worked, would be if the Jedi just like came up behind May and just like grabbed May and like took her in as like a prisoner, but then like the stranger and Osha got away. Like, it would have been really dramatic and everything. But there is a point where they say like the excuse for the necessity of the mind wipe is like, if you remember me, then the Jedi will use you to find me. So that's how they justify, or not even justify, explain the necessity of the mind wipe. And it's like you were saying, it's just really hard to buy it. Like, that's not the most elegant solution here.
Well, and that's one of those things too. It's like, oh well, if I don't wipe your mind, you'll be able to tell the Jedi where I am. It's like, I guess other people would have thought. I wouldn't have thought of that. I wouldn't have been watching season 2 going, why doesn't she just take them right to where they are, And also, why do they have to be there all the time? Why couldn't they, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really seem like an issue that would have been an issue, I guess. But they wrote it into this episode as an issue. It's like, well, you didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel, I guess, about that part of it. I do think, but yeah, that makes sense. It does, kind of what you were saying there makes sense. So that probably is what their motivation or their thinking was on all of that. Yeah, I guess, that makes sense to a degree. I mean, I don't think it really works, but I get maybe where they were looking at it that way. I do think it is best going into the next season to have them not together, though, because I sort of feel like when the two of them are together and on the same page and there's nothing kind of separating them, I feel like that's like the natural conclusion of this story about these two people, like I don't know. I think like the them being separated, opposites. I mean, honestly, I think like just having them flip would be pretty cool for next season, and they've kind of basically done that. But I guess they did it through a mind wipe. I guess with the mind wipe, sometime next season, May's gonna wake up and go, "Oh my God, now I remember all this stuff, and now I hate you, Jedi," or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, it just. Yeah, I don't know. Didn't super well. It didn't really work for me at all, I guess. And that was my big. I have two big complaints, I guess, about this episode, and two reasons that this episode was pretty disappointing for me. I mean, anyone listening could probably tell, like, I enjoyed 90% of it. Like, most of it I thought was really good, and there's a lot of stuff I would praise, but this is one big thing that really kind of took me out of the episode, and then sort of a more general complaint towards the end here. But speaking of being towards the end, we should push towards the end of this episode as we're getting a little long in the tooth here. So after that, the Jedi show up. They arrest May. May's like, what did I do? And they take her back to, I guess, to Coruscant, right? And May and Vernestra have this conversation where, and this is really well done too. They have the conversation where Vernestra is explaining things to May, but it also weaves in a montage sort of sequence footage of Vernestra on Brendok discovering Sol's dead body, and then also weaves in Vernestra talking to that Senate tribunal. So she's explaining everything to May, she's explaining things to the Senate, and we're seeing kind of her, not thought process, but I guess the process of her realizing that this is the move to make, all in one kind of 3 location or 3 kind of element sequence. And I thought that was super, super well done.
Yeah. I mean, it's shady. What we're seeing here, and it's like it's kind of chilling seeing Vernestra like doubling down. I mean, I guess we should also mention, while we're talking about Vernestra, we didn't actually talk about how she's like, when she gets to Brendok, she's like, you, like, my old Padawan is here, and talking about the stranger. But
yeah,
I think that was like pretty obvious.
Yeah, it was. And so, like, I had theorized, oh, maybe she's secretly a Sith or whatever, which I think would have been pretty bad, and I'm glad they didn't do that. It was kind of a dumb idea, but we knew there was some connection there, right? So that makes sense. And and then explains that he was part of the Jedi Order and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's all good, and that'll be interesting, in the second season if there is one. I think too, like that's another thing. She could have shown up at the tree there. I guess she had all those other Jedi with her, but no, she sent them off to do different things too. So if she would have just shown up at the tree, there could have been a moment between her and the stranger, and that chaos or conflict or whatever could have probably ended up separating the two girls that way, right? But maybe then May would want to go along with her. I don't know at that point, but yeah. So Vernestra is or was the stranger's Jedi Master. So yeah, more to learn about that. I'm sure if there's a second season. But when she's talking to May, she says Soul justified every step with the love he had for your sister. So he's telling May, like, yep, like he made all these mistakes. He did all this stuff. She's like, I don't have the exact dialogue, but she's like, he killed does he say killed your mother? And she's like, he was a friend. He was a good person, but he did an awful, awful thing. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting, like, because we see her say that to May, but then when she's in that Senate tribunal, she's like, oh yeah, he was like a rogue Jedi who couldn't deal with what happened and killed all the other ones and then killed himself. And so,
killed
yeah.
his accomplices to maintain the cover story.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then it cuts to her, like, burning his body.
Yeah. That was really, like, I like that imagery. Like, he was on the sort of, like, raft or whatever, and she was holding the torch, and, like, yeah. Yeah, so, like I said, super well done, because, like, this is obviously difficult for her. I don't think she takes any joy in what she's doing. Like, when it's just May she's talking to, she's willing to open up a little bit and be like, he was my friend, like, he was a good person, but he did a horrible thing. And, like, she obviously, there's a lot of regret and sadness about how this has to play out. But then when she's talking to that Senate tribunal, she is just like, straight up, dude, that guy Soul, he's a murderer. He and, to an extent he is, but, like, he murdered these people. He killed himself. He was trying to hide everything. And again, to an extent that's true, but she's so cold about it. And obviously she's doing the same thing he did, right? She's being dishonest and she's lying because she thinks it is the right thing to do, or even if not the right thing to do, the only thing to do, the best wrong thing to do. I don't know how you'd phrase it, but, like, of all the bad options, that's the least bad option. Maybe it would be a way to put it. So yeah, I know I saw some real targeted, like, anger and dissatisfaction with her as a character. From, like, at the end here. Fans. Yeah, or just, like, even, some of our friends I was talking to were just like, man, she's kind of on my shit list now. Like, I'm pretty mad that she did this, but I guess it's kind of a theme with me, but I'm like pretty willing to kind of look at some of this Jedi behavior and be like, well, what else were they going to do? I don't know. Like, it seemed like that's what, I can understand why she did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can still, yeah. I mean,
Soul was wrong. Soul was very wrong. This episode makes it super clear. It was clear before. Like, he was really, really wrong. I'm just saying, like, as I was watching the show, many times I felt like, okay, but I can see how a person would make this awful decision. Like, I can see why somebody would make this mistake. And then to a certain extent too, like, the further you get into a lie, the harder and harder it is, to get out of it. And doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It doesn't make it right. But, like, I can understand that, or, like, it's very human. You know what I mean? Like, it makes sense. And I feel the same thing with Vernestra. It's like, what is she going to do? Like let the Jedi be destroyed because, like, stuff, like, really blew up and went the wrong way, and her friend made a dumbass decision that, he never recovered from. And, like, you got to do something. And she's probably thinking this does the least damage to, to whoever. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think, like, this feels like an Aesop's fable or something, because I feel like what everyone it is trying to do and like being dishonest and everything is just going to lead to tragedy for them. And her whole thing is, I don't know, like, I don't know if it's she's just like a shitty, deceitful person, and maybe this isn't her first rodeo with this. Maybe she's been doing this for a while, or if she's a good person trying. But like, I mean, what does that even mean? But I think if she is in fact doing this to protect the institution of the Jedi, like to me, this is totally like, you know, high-ranking religious figures covering up like child sexual abuse for years and years. Obviously, I'm not equating because that's like a horrendous thing, but I think like the cover up happens because they're like, well, this will dismantle Catholicism or whatever if this gets out. So these people, they work in tandem to protect these like awful priests and religious figures who have been complicit in this for years. These just like shitty people, in order to like protect an institution and to protect their autonomy. And then, when the stuff comes out eventually, because it always does, then they've ended up like undermining and doing so much more damage to the institution if they would have just addressed it initially and like had the consequences. It's the same thing with like military cover-ups and all of that.
I mean, I think the thing is that like she's not protecting anyone who's really guilty at this point, because like Sol is dead, and so are the other three Jedi who were involved in that situation on Brendok. So, I think, of course, you're right. Like, it's going to come out. It's going to end up probably causing more harm. Like, you should be honest. You know what I mean? Like, that is, I think, the morally correct thing, the ethically correct thing. But, for storytelling and characters, I think these characters are pretty complex. And so I think, I can very much see why she's doing this and how she would justify it to herself, and also how she might look at any of the other, possible solutions and think, well, this one's wrong, but it's the best one of the wrong ones. And, if you're talking about somebody covering up crimes, and like, well, I'll just send you to a different church, you know what I mean? Which is something that happens a lot. And we probably don't want to spend too much time talking about real world analogs here, but like, to me, that is evil on a completely different level, because what you're doing is intentionally facilitating continued evil. I think her situation is like, this is more like Shakespearean tragedy or something. A tragedy happened, right? Like, this should have been avoided. I wish Romeo and Juliet weren't dead right now, but they are. What's the best way out of it? And like, I think it's more. That's how I'm interpreting it, and I think that's the kind of story that maybe is trying to be told here. It's like, we know as an audience that all of this was unavoidable. We know that this is tragedy, and can we? I mean, it's setting things up for the future, right? Like, this is dramatically very interesting too. Like, what's going to happen with all of this if we continue this story. So, in all those ways, I think it makes sense. But and I know a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people are not looking at her and thinking like, yeah, you know what, like, your logic makes sense here. Maybe this was the best thing to do or whatever. So I'm probably being, again, a little more generous towards the the Jedi characters than I should be, or than a lot of other people are. But I just think it was this problem was set up in a way where I'm looking at it and I'm going, yeah, I understand why she's doing this. I follow this character's logic. I know why they're doing it. I know why it's probably not going to be a good thing, but I get it and it makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
And there's other times where I'm like, in the show where I'm just like, why would they do that? You know, there's like four other things that would make way more sense, you know? So yeah, so I liked it. And, you know, just again, from a technical level, the way that whole scene played out was like so good.
Yeah. And, you know, I disagree with her choice, like as a viewer and as a person. But again, just reiterating, I don't need these characters to represent my morals personally to be compelling. And so I think what this is very compelling storytelling, and it is like oh, you are just like digging yourself in deeper here, and I'm like here to watch this train wreck. But
yeah,
the kind of conclusion we come to with all of this is she goes to the Senate and is like, yeah, this Soul guy, he's real bad news. He, you know, he killed these people, and then he killed the Jedi to cover it up, but we took care of it, so don't worry. And their reaction is, okay, that's insane. We need to have an external review of the Jedi beginning immediately. We cannot even wait to take this to committee. You people are nuts, and we need to have drastic action. Because what you just told me is so messed up. Where it like had the opposite effect of what she was hoping would come from it.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think the reaction would have been stronger if she was just like, if she explained what really happened. You know what I mean? I think if she was like, there's Osha, who we trained to be a Jedi, is teamed up with the stranger who we teamed to be a Jedi. But now all the stuff we taught them and all the power we helped them channel, they're using in, you know, in a very dangerous way. Certainly what I think the Senate would think is a very dangerous way, right? Like that's Rayancourt's like whole fear. Oh, well, one of you is going to snap, and then who's going to be able to stop you? You're going to have all this unchecked power or whatever, right? So I think if she went to that Senate tribunal and she's like, okay, here's the thing. We had 4 Jedi who did a really awful thing. They lied about it for decades. They caused this whole thing with these witches that probably didn't need to happen. One of the kids that was there, we trained to be a Jedi. She's hardcore now. She's off with this other guy who we also trained to be a Jedi. He's hardcore now. They're super dangerous. Plus, now we got another one with us who has a right to be all super... Like, if she tells the truth, it's going to be, like, that much more insane, you know? Like, I don't know how you spin that story. Like, I don't even know if she would have been done talking before they would have been, like, going off. You know what I mean? So I think this is damage control. And, yeah, like, it was inevitable that they were going to be doing this this independent review one way or the other. But I think she at least presents it in a way where they don't completely lose their minds. Like, I think inevitably they would have if she told them the real story.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. It's still, I mean, it did not serve, I mean, yeah, maybe I guess it could always be worse. And maybe the truth is worse, but I don't know. They weren't really buying it either way. And it kind of led to the same reaction either way. But yeah.
It's politics, though. Think about any issue that is like a political issue, and then think about each side of the political spectrum, and then like, oh, well, they went and they made a really compelling argument, and then guess what? The other side was like, whatever, I'm not listening to that, and like, you know what I mean? Like it's
or like, so what you're saying is, and then say like something completely insane. Yeah,
I really liked Rayancourt. Like the performance was really good. I think the writing was really good. Very interesting character. But never for 1 second did I think, like when he was talking to Vernestra earlier on, like, oh, maybe I won't do the independent review. I mean, like this was 150% happening no matter what, you know? So, Okay, real quick, because it's getting late. Got to wrap this up. We're just about to hit the 2 hour mark, which is a long episode. The show, the episode ends with two pretty crazy shots. One is Osha and the stranger holding hands. Not holding, like, I guess they're kind of holding hands, but they're standing next to each other.
Lightsaber.
Yeah, and standing next to each other, very much in the same kind of posture and positioning as Luke and Leia at the end of Empire Strikes Back when they're looking out that window. So that's an inversion of something that, you know, we've seen before. Yeah, that's subversive, I think, for sure.
And I think the key is, though, they're both holding the lightsaber. I think that's symbolic in both the like, they're going to go like natural born killers and do some damage with this thing, because they're probably going to go do some Sithy stuff together. I don't, you know, but also they're both holding the lightsaber, and we know like the rule of two, and we know like the tragedy of all of this, and the tragedy of Osha's decision is, you know, whatever connection they may or may not feel to each other right now, like they both can't exist if there is like if there's another master. And if it is Plagueis, we know Plagueis likely goes on to train Palpatine, so he's gonna survive this whole thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
One of them gets to wield that lightsaber at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and so, and this is kind of like my big dissatisfaction, I guess, with this finale, because the finale wraps up the season. You know, so it's more than just an episode. It's like basically the final comment from the show and from the story, right? At least until there's a second season, which I hope there will be. But yeah, like to me, the tragedy is that she turns to the dark side and that she goes with the stranger, you know? And I've seen, like I shared an interview with Leslie Headland that I don't have pulled up right now, but, you know, like where she made a comment, paraphrasing, but she was like, yeah, it's tragic. Like, we know they're not going to be able to go off and kind of like conquer the galaxy together. You know, this tragedy is that this isn't going to work out for them. And I'm like, to me, and I know you disagree about this, Ryan, so that's okay. But to me, I'm like, I want Star Wars to tell the story that like these characters turning to the dark side itself is the tragedy, you know? Like I don't see, and this is a pretty hyperbolic or exaggerated example, but like, I don't see like Dr. Loomis shoot and kill Michael Myers at the end of a Halloween movie and go, oh, the tragedy is that he didn't get to keep going out and killing people. It's like, no, the tragedy is that like that all this bad stuff happened and that this person went down this dark road. You know, and like I never really watched a movie like that and thought like, I don't know, like I can watch stuff and identify with villainous characters, or, you know, I can handle a story that doesn't have a happy ending or whatever. But in this one, it just felt, I don't know, I guess just muddy at the end. I would say it's either muddy morality or almost like the morality of the season was really to celebrate the dark side. And I wanted the show to explore the dark side. I wanted the show to, you know, kind of dig into the complexities and the failings and the fact that the Jedi are not infallible, you know. But I walked away from the end of this episode, and by extension, this season of this show, feeling like, like it is it's more celebrating like the dark side than than not, and I'm not super happy with that, I guess.
I think after how we've seen the Jedi portrayed, like I don't think they're much to celebrate here. think there's something to be said within a different path. But I think what's really interesting to me is that so far what we're presented with, and I don't know, maybe they'll go and like everyone will get redeemed and they'll all be Skywalkers or something at the end. But I think what's just exciting to me about this is because it is different and subversive, and I think you can tell stories from different perspectives and kind of understand why people make the choices that they make, and that there's still like value in characters who aren't explicitly team light side or whatever. So I don't know, I was into it, and I'm more invested in characters I think like this at this point in Star Wars than just like really affirmative moral type characters, because we've seen that a million times. We've seen so many heroes and only one true villain in Star Wars. That always comes back to Palpatine, like the one bad guy in the entire galaxy. Everyone else was just they get redeemed. Your Huxes, your Vaders, everyone's redeemed. But I don't know, I think playing around in this sandbox and being like, hey, these characters are complicated and they have stories to tell, and maybe they'll turn to be good or just die or whatever. But in the meantime, I think it's cool. It's interesting. It's different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it's cool that Osha goes with the stranger, but just like the overall sense at the end of this episode and season was just so like, I mean, we could, I feel like the show could very much explore like, oh, this character makes a different decision. This character goes to the dark side. Like, we can understand why they went to the dark side. We can follow them and see like what their journey is on the dark side. Like, that all sounds good. But there was just this like prevailing sense at the end of this episode that like, not only are Osha and the stranger teamed up and Osha's turned to the dark side and we don't know if she's going to stay on the dark side or not, but like, it just felt like every element at the end here, from Vernestra to Soul to the Senate to everything, was like, everyone's awful. And like, you know what, audience, just like, let's just give into it. Like, there's no hope. There's no redeeming quality in anyone, and it's like, man, I can see centering the villains and even like telling a story from the villainous or from the Sith perspective, but like, I don't know, it's just me, I guess, but as an audience member, I can't just to be like, oh, it's a triumphant moment that Osha turns to the dark side, like, that's just like, I don't know. I'm not there yet anyways, I guess yeah, and especially in Star Wars. I don't think I'd be there in anything, but especially in Star Wars, like, to me, that's like, I don't know. It's a little too far for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect encapsulation of the general vibe of 2024 in America during this election year, where it is kind of like, yeah, everyone is actually pretty awful and there is no hope, and like, let's just see what's interesting and how things shake out. But
yeah, I don't know, it kind of feels to me like Osha just really flipped her political allegiances and went and sided with the political spectrum that keeps me up at night, and also that I'm supposed to be like applauding that and feeling like it was a really great decision. And like, I can see like, hey, we live in a cynical time, so it's a cynical show for a cynical time. I can see that, but yeah, tough for me to be like, yeah, just, I don't know, everything sucks, go with the worst of them. Like, fine, everything sucks, like, the show could tell me everything sucks, but like, for our point of view character to then be like, yeah, I'm signing up for the evil cause, and and for the show to say to me like everything sucks so bad, so just like be cool with the fact that's the road they're going down. That doesn't, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's reflective of our time to an extent, but
I mean, I would say the dark side here has less of a body count across the show, so I don't know. Maybe the space cops aren't the best.
I don't know is that true, or do we just not care about the body count of the dark side? Because
in the course of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the Stranger kill like 10 people. You know what I mean? At least, right? Like
10, and the Jedi killed like 30.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's
Anyways,
true. That is true. That is true.
Let's go to this last scene, which sucks.
I thought you might feel that way. I
hated this. Here we go. Big stinker.
Well, say hello to our little green friend, because he was there in silhouette. I'll just say Leslie Headland has talked a lot about a self-contained story, a story that's going to be satisfying for viewers without a second season, because you never know if you're going to get one. That's not how I walked away from The Acolyte season 1. I will also say that she said things like, hey, you never know if you're going to get a chance to play in the world of Star Wars again, so might as well go for everything you can. And this scene makes sense from that perspective, so maybe that's what she was kind of thinking and going for. But yeah, Vern goes to talk to Yoda. We need to talk, she says to Yoda. So, I mean, as soon as they were talking about the High Council and everything, it really felt like we would probably see Yoda, right? So,
and sure, that would have made sense if they had actually gone to the Jedi Council and like had that conversation, but that never actually ended up happening. And Vernestra just did all this damage independent of the Jedi Council, and then after doing the damage goes to Yoda and just to be like, hey, guess what I just did? Or I just did this thing and I feel bad about it.
Well, that maybe protects... Why? Well, because otherwise, like...
he's supposed to be wise. You would go to him for answers of like, whoa, we're in a pickle here. What do we do?
But it seems to me the two possible options are she goes to Yoda first, and then Yoda's like, yeah, don't do that, because he's supposed to be wise, right? Don't lie through your teeth. And then we don't have this conflict and this same kind of resolution that we have here. Or Yoda's like, yeah, cool, lie. And then it completely changes our perspective on Yoda down the road, which I don't like that, though. I don't like her coming in and being like, I'm going to tell my story, my Acolyte story, whatever, and I will just completely... Like, I think that would be, personally, to me, that's a little bit overstepping, like, you know, her mandate in making a show like this. Like, it's all new characters. It's in a different timeline. Like, why say, well, I'll just completely change, like, how people view Yoda just because I can or whatever? Like, it's not even relevant to what she's doing, really, you know? I don't know. Yeah. I think that it's okay that the High Council didn't know that she was doing this because... it's just another layer of complexity to it, I suppose, right? Like, then next season there's room for conflict there too. Or, you know, she could have gone to the High Council, I guess, and they could have been split. We saw that in the Phantom Menace and other times. Like, they don't all agree necessarily. Yoda could have been like, yeah, I'm not into it. And then other members of the council could have been like, well, we outvote you. They could have done a million things, I guess. But the thing I would not have wanted them to do is have Yoda be basically by proxy make the same decision as Vernestra makes here. I'm glad they didn't do that.
In this, but like this just, I don't know. It just like really doesn't make sense why she would, you know, tell all these lies and do all this stuff and then decide to go to him. And I think it's just like, it's worse too because it's supposed to be like the cool MCU post credits like stinger, and it's like, who cares? Like, how does this even make the episode better. Like, it's just fan service for the purpose of fan service. Like, I don't know. Maybe they'll do something cool with it if there's a second season, but like, I think, or maybe this was like just to, you know, appease people who were like put off by, like, they felt like they couldn't just end on the scene of the stranger and Osha, like that was too like dark and cynical maybe, even though I do feel like it's complex and tragic, and it's not like a Darth Vader snapback, like, yeah, that's badass when he cuts all those dudes down type of thing. Like, I think it's I think it is supposed to be like, oh damn, like this is the Anakin Padme marriage at the end of Attack of the Clones, where it's like, oh yeah, it's so beautiful, wow, what a cool thing, when you're actually like, oh god, what are they doing? Like, that's a horrible choice. Getting married in secret there. I think that's more the vibe of that, but I wonder if they just felt like, no, we gotta have something for the fans or something. I don't know. But yeah, I didn't like this at all. I think it was like a really cheap way to end the series that was not about this stuff at all. It was so minimal on the fan service throughout. Like, there were obviously some like dorky bits that were in there, but it was so like, we are telling our very own story. We're not like echoing things. We are actually subverting things and surprising. And then it's like, okay, here's a little fan service as a treat. Like, wow.
Yeah, I didn't love it. I mean, it was fun for like a second. It was like, whoa, that's Yoda. And then it, like, you know, you think about it for a second and it's like, okay, well, yeah, it's pretty corny. And I do not want Star Wars to be like constantly having the post-credit scene and always going for the big, you know. So yeah, I don't love it, but I don't know. Not the thing that bothered me the most about this episode, at least I can say, I guess. So,
all right. That bothered me the most.
Yeah.
It may be, yeah.
All right. Well, we gotta wrap this episode up. It's gone long, Ryan. We will not be back next week with another episode. I am riding my bike from one side of Iowa to the other over the course of 7 or 8 days, and it's I feel like I'm going to battle here. I'm going to war. So head down, trying to ride my bike. No episode next week. So we'll see. Maybe the week after that. But until then, you can find all of our previous shows about the Acolyte, and please reach out to us. Let us know how you feel about this season finale and about the show overall. All of our previous episodes are at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. You can email the show, blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. Follow the show on Blue Sky, or use the link in our show notes to join our Discord, where we're always talking about the Acolyte and Star Wars. And if you want to follow Ryan online, Ryan, where can listeners do that?
I'm on Blue Sky at DVD Menus and via Malay.
All right, cool. Well, thanks very much for listening or watching, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Blockade Runner Podcast.